Hello everyone, and welcome to part 10 of the React Redux tutorial, where we will perform asynchronous CRUD operations to make API calls and more. If you've been watching my tutorials up to this point and found value in the content, please like the video. Now, before we get into the tutorial, I really need to clarify a few key terms. One distinction is the difference between an action creator method or an action creator and an action. Although they are related, they have entirely different responsibilities. So let's take a look at the Redux slice. In the Redux Toolkit, when we configure the slice by defining create or typing create, Redux Toolkit automatically generates the corresponding action creator method. Action creator method and action creator are used interchangeably, and I'll try and stick to just one term, action creator method, in this tutorial. Here at the bottom, we have all of our action creator methods, and we export these from the slice and import them into a component. So let's just take a look at an example where we're using the create action creator method. So we imported it into the post form. And here in the handle submit, when the user clicks the submit button, the action creator method is invoked or called, and it returns an action object with the type post createPostThunk, and a payload, which is this new post, gets dispatched to the Redux store. So in the post slice, if we go up to the create, this represents the action, the parameters that we're passing over. We can destructure the action, and we will get both the type and the payload. So the action is passed to the reducer, and the action's payload is used to update the Redux global state. So far, we've been using create slice from the Redux Toolkit, which automatically creates action creator methods for us once we define them. These action creator methods interact with the Redux global state only, which allow us to create, remove, and update posts immediately, and we can see the results right away in the client browser. These operations are called synchronous because we can execute them one right after another without any delays, because there's no database or external API involved, which may otherwise create delays. The difference between what we have been doing in the previous tutorials and what we're doing in this tutorial going forward has to do with using an external API or a database. When we introduce an external API, we are introducing delays in receiving and sending data. So we need another tool that can handle the delays that are introduced with external APIs. And Redux provides a more powerful tool called createAsyncThunk. And it is a middleware that allows us to create super action creator methods called Thunks. Now, Thunks have the ability to multitask. They allow us to send and receive data from the database and at the same time perform validation and modification on the data we receive and send. Thunks perform error handling as well as data processing. Thunks handle all these interactions while ensuring that the application remains responsive while waiting for the server to respond. The Redux slice will automatically generate lifecycle actions to handle pending, fulfilled, and rejected state. So now let's take another look at the post slice and create our first thunk. So the first thing we need to do is import the createAsyncThunk into our post slice. And we simply need to add it here, createAsyncThunk. And as the name implies, this middleware will handle asynchronous logic like making external API calls or requests to an external API. You've probably heard the term CRUD operations. Well, CRUD is an acronym for create, read, update, and delete. And these allow us to interact with the external API or database by creating, fetching or reading, updating or modifying, removing or deleting posts. And these operations occur dynamically. When we create a post, although we're communicating and sending data to a database, we should still see the updates in real time or within seconds if the application is optimized properly. And we use HTTP methods post, get, put, and delete to perform CRUD operations. The post method is used to create a post in the database. The get method is used to read a post from the database. The put method is used to update a post in the database. And the delete method is used to delete a post from the database. So a rule of thumb is if you're starting off with an empty database, it makes sense that you would be starting with a create operation to post something to the database rather than fetching data from the database. So you would be using the create. But if you already have data, if you have an existing database, then you would start off with fetching data using the get method. Since we don't have any data in our external API or our database, we're going to be starting with the create operation to add data to our external API. So we're going to be using the post method. So we are creating our super action creator method called a Thunk, and it's not going to be included under the create slice. So right above the create slice middleware, we'll initiate the createAsyncThunk that we just imported from the Redux Toolkit. We'll initiate it here and assign it to a variable that we'll name createPostThunk. And we also need to include the keyword export because we want the Thunk to be accessible wherever we import it in the application. And we're going to feed the Thunk two parameters, the action type, which is post, create post Thunk, and we're going to feed it a function, which is the async function. And let's correct this. This should be lowercase. This first parameter lets Redux know to associate this action type with the Thunk. And it should be Thunk here at the end. And the second parameter, the async function, is where all the asynchronous logic resides. So let's move this down. We're going to pass to this function an argument post arg. That's what we're going to name it. This was sent over from the component and will be sent to the server. And we'll be making asynchronous calls to the server using Axios, so we need to import that at the top. We're going to import, I think we need to install it first. We don't have install, so let's go down here and let's install Axios. And once it's installed, we can import Axios from Axios here, and we can use it in the application. So we're going to use Axios to make a call to the server. So let's set that up. We're going to make our call using Axios. So the Axios post method requires two parameters, the URL, which is the API endpoint, and the second parameter is an argument, which is the data or the payload. This post arg coming from the component is an object. Axios parses the data and basically converting it into a JSON string, stringifying the data so that it can be stored in the database. When Axios sends back a response or returns a response, it converts the data back to a JSON object so that the data can be used on the front end. For the URL, we're going to be using mock API to simulate making API calls to a database. Mock API is not a database and doesn't connect to an actual database. It simulates the behavior of a real API that interacts with a database. So this is the testing API that I'm going to be using for this project, and I'm going to show you the website where you can set up your own testing API. So it's here, it's called mock API. And what you do is just go here and you follow the steps to create an account. I'm just going to show you how mine was set up. Add the plus sign to add a new project. And so you'll have an option for a free plan. And then you name it, and then you create the endpoint, the API prefix, which I named mine API. And then you click on the project and you can go in, you create a new resource here. When you create the new resource, you need to create whatever your schema is. So mine is name, description, and author. So here you would put data type. So you can go in and it's pretty simple and intuitive to set up. This is what mine looks like, just to give you an idea of how the schema should be set up. And this is going to be auto-generated, the ID. So just go in, it's not difficult to set up. So now that we have the API, we can go ahead and test this out to make sure that it's working. Let's go over to the post form component, and we're using the regular action creator method, but we want the createPostThunk because we're going to be communicating with a database now, or a simulated database. And now we can go down to the create or to the dispatch, and we can update the name here to use createPostThunk. And everything else basically stays the same. Okay, so let's save this and let's go down and start our application up. Run dev. And we have a post that was in local storage, and we're going to correct this. But for now, let's add a post. We're going to call this mock API name, mock API description, and mock API author. And let's hit create, and let's go back to our post slice, and let's just grab that URL. And there it is. So it is working. So let's go back over to our application, and now we know this URL works. Let's copy it here. And we're going to create a variable because we want to use it in other places. And here above the createAsyncThunk, we're going to create a variable that we're going to call post URL. And we are going to store it there. And then we can use it here with Axios. So this is my personal API, and it won't be available after this tutorial. So please head on over to Mock API and create a testing endpoint for your application. And let's tidy this up with our semicolons. So when the user clicks on submit, the dispatch hook is invoked, and the createPostThunk will return or generate an action. But where are the actions generated from this thunk handled? Well, they're not handled in the createAsyncThunk as you might expect. Instead, they're handled within the create slice middleware, but by a specific field below the reducers called ExtraReducers. ExtraReducers handle actions created by createAsyncThunk. So this looks like a good place to end our video. In the next video, we'll continue to build out our ExtraReducers. If you found value in this tutorial so far, don't forget to like and share this video. Also, subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell button. If you want to be the first to know, connect to the Hub, Source Coder Hub's community. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.